Item D, discussion resolution, the request to designate the Board of Ed facility sinking funds for the tennis courts of $85,000. Be it resolved that in accordance with Chapter 6, Section 8F of the Town Charter, the following transfer is hereby made from the Board of Ed Education Property, Plant, and Equipment Sinking Fund contingency, $85,000, to the Board of Ed Education Property, Plant, and Equipment Sinking Fund, the Tennis Courts Construction Services, $85,000. Date prepared October 12, 2022, prepared by John Wilcox, Director of Finance.
So moved.
Councilor Mangini, and a second by Councilor Despard. Discussion. Councilor Pisner.
Okay, so I have a lot of questions on this, and I actually asked John before the meeting. When I look through our budget book, and again, I'm new to the budget, it doesn't have exactly what we have in the sinking funds. And so John said he could possibly get me that number. You have it. Thank you. I appreciate it, John.
Yep. Okay. So right now the town has three sinking funds. One is for town property, plant, and equipment. One is for Board of Ed property, plant, and equipment, and another is for infrastructure. The town property, plant, and equipment and the infrastructure funds all have each have $300,000, and the Board of Ed property, plant, and equipment has $204,702 actually.
Okay. So it leads me to my next question. I was very iffy on spending $600,000 on a tennis court in the beginning. I did not want to spend it, and I did not vote for the additional $200,000. We are close to $1 million now on tennis courts, on one tennis court. I cannot sit here and spend our taxpayers' money. I just can't sit here and do it. In the PAR, I'm not seeing any update as to where we are with the tennis courts. Have they been started? Are they? Nothing's been done. But we are anticipating that it's going to cost us more money. At this point, I cannot give another dime to tennis courts.
Through the mayor, I think the issue is that we are the victim of some supply chain issues. There was an estimate given that we used in good faith through the budget process. And unfortunately, due to all of the competing projects and the timing attached to them, by the time we got to dealing with the tennis courts specifically after the turf and track issues and the overall improvement strategies at the high school, the price has increased. We did due diligence. We had the field turf reps look at other projects. Our athletic director, I believe, called other communities with like-sized tennis courts. These are the prices. They're not good prices. We're not happy with them either. But the role that we play is to advise you as to how to make a project work. The tennis courts are integral to the community. They're integral to the high school. Last year, we had the #1 ranked tennis player who was not able to play tennis on their home court because the CIAC determined them to be unplayable. That's an embarrassment. So what we did is we tried to be creative because we are up against the fact that we have referendum limits, and so we can't violate those. So I will let John, for the record, go through and talk about what we've done in order to make this work, which is completely allowable, creative, but also legal. And I think that is something from a transparency standpoint that we felt strongly about. But I would really encourage you to think twice about voting down this project, because all that's doing is pushing this down the pike. You have a large number of tennis courts that are right now the only playable tennis courts in the entire community, because the annex is not playable either, which is another issue. We've given over the South Road to pickleball. We have a high school varsity team, 2 of them actually. We have a responsibility to get projects done as part of this overall plant maintenance, and there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of making sure that we keep up with maintenance, and that's a big issue here in this town. But for right now, we've come across a solution that gets this project done at the cost now, and I hope that that cost isn't going to escalate, but it could. So this is what we're presenting, and I hope that once you hear how we've stacked up the financial numbers, it will be something that you can come forward to support.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Ludwig, John?
Yeah, so go ahead, my questions, go ahead, John. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the sinking funds were set up in like the 2019 budget, and we started funding them at that time. So when we put the money in, the funds were actually appropriated for Board of Ed property, plant, and equipment in the 2019 and 2020 budgets. Those were the last times that we funded those. So those monies met the capital appropriation requirement in those fiscal years. So we have this $85,000 would be coming out of funds that were appropriated to be spent on Board of Ed property, plant, and equipment in 2020. Okay, so that $85,000 is that year. We've had some funds appropriated in 2022, and the balance of the funding was in 2023. So that's the accumulation. All of them individually met the capital appropriation requirement from the town charter.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
So my question, just want to make sure we're clear. This is where I just disagree a little bit. So I agree with you on how we collect the money. So when we go get audited when we do the audit, the independent audit, they're going to see 800-something thousand in 722 to 630-23 budget. So it hits the charter limit with money from prior budgets, which I agree with you. So it accumulates to fund the project. So here's what I get where when you say, I want to make sure we don't violate the charter, we're spending more than the charter limit. Yes, we're taking it from different years, but within this budget year, we're spending more than the charter allows us to. So I want to make sure that we have the backup that says and again, we do it on multiple projects where we accumulate money over years, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all. But again, going back to how we did the roofs originally, even though we accumulated more than the charter, we could only spend or allocate what the charter allowed us in that policy year. That's why I want to make sure that there's not a difference. And that's how maybe we were wrong. And I think maybe you reached out to bond counsel. So if you have an answer, I want to give you the chance to answer that.
Okay. So the section of the charter states that the council may appropriate by or adopt a resolution appropriating funds for capital projects.
Right.
Any such appropriation that exceeds in any fiscal year 0.0002 of the current grand list shall not be effective until it goes to referendum.
Right.
Okay. So that's where we get the referendum limit. But what they're talking about there is an appropriation of funds. Okay. The appropriation is the definition of an appropriation is a pool of money set aside for a particular purpose.
Right.
Okay. So this is the budget side of the equation. Once we've accumulated, we want to accumulate funds
Right.
to do a project that's going to cost more than the referendum limit. We accumulate the funds, but then you can it doesn't mention anything about actually spending the money.
Well, that's where we have I think my disagreement is I agree with you. The allocation of funds is to avoid going to referendum. It's a way of doing it over a number of years so we don't have to go to referendum every time we do a project. But again, I thought it was my understanding based on bond counsel. That's why I wanted if you can clarify, we still could only spend in a budget year the charter limit, even if we allocated money greater, which allowed us to not go out the referendum, but we still had to live within the charter limits of spending. That's where
There's nothing that I've ever seen in the charter that specifies the spending piece. You don't want to start a project. I mean, you can break down projects into sections, but you don't want to start one until you have all the funds because you can't guarantee that you're going to have. So by just this overall necessity, I think that, so for example, we appropriated funds for the South River Street Bridge.
Right.
we didn't start, I mean, we started doing some of the design and things like that, but once we had what the original estimate of the project was, the project price kept escalating and we kept appropriating more. And we haven't actually started the construction until we had enough money set aside to do the project. And that we will end up spending more in any one fiscal year than that.
But don't we have to go to
Funds have been-
referendum on that once the project starts? My understanding when we did that, eventually we'd have to go to referendum because we're going to be spending $3-4 million.
No, appropriating it over the multi-budget process was designed so we didn't have to go to referendum on it.
Okay.
But the actual spending has never been when we did the Barnard Street School, okay, that was the first roof that we actually
Right.
did break down into, but we needed to get a section of that one done. And so we did the section to the maximum that we could do.
Right.
And then we moved on and did the rest, and we ended up actually in 3, I think, installments on that one.
Right. But we did it
So what we did with the other 2 schools was then we appropriated the funds over multiple years.
Right.
But we did the whole roof in one shot.
I agree. I'm not arguing, but I think we also did it, we did the project in different policy years. That was my only, again, where I think we did that in different policy years because we lived within the spending, again, the charter limit. So I'm just saying, that's the only thing I say I have a slight disagreement. I appreciate you giving me the answer. I also appreciate the information. I mean, and my only question, this is good stuff. Will there be a warranty on the work? So, I mean, we just finished the high school about 8 years ago, and those courts, unfortunately didn't last too long.
Right. We do have a 25-year crack warranty for the courts, and just so everyone knows, they are the special, what is it called?
Post-tension.
Post-tension, as opposed to the cheaper version. It's not blacktop.
Again, thank you for giving the information. Thank you, John.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, John. Councilor Hopkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do agree with Mr. Wilcox's interpretation of the charter. I think there's some safety benefits and flexibility benefits that happen when we do appropriation like this. I think I respect Councilor Pisner's analysis of the budget, and I always respect a line-by-line reading. I think we ultimately maybe disagree about what kind of investment this might be for the community. I think creating recreational opportunities like this, it's helpful for bringing families to town, for keeping families to town. It is, I agree, a sad state of affairs when the top-ranked tennis player can't play tennis on his home court. I've sat in on some leisure services meetings talking about the use of the pickleball court at Fermi. That's in a bad shape as well. I think this is a good investment. It's not one that we should take lightly. I think we should make sure to scrutinize all these things like my counterparts are doing, but I ultimately come down differently on this. Thank you.
Councilor Finger?
Thank you, Mayor. So when this all started with the courts there is when Enfield High was starting, because I was still, again, crew leader, buildings and grounds. All that equipment, that heavy equipment they were moving in and out, and I was reporting this prior to Donald Nunes being our DPW director. It was before him, it was prior to him. Those courts and cracks were getting larger. I was there with my own crew leader truck with a come along trying to straighten out the poles so the kids can play for during recess or recreation, and for the school to have it. I'm going to support this because this is just something that we got to have for our school. This is something that we spend all this money on it, and I'll do respect to everybody else on this upside down horseshoe. That it's just, if we're going to continue doing things right in this town to keep people here and to do something for our school and for our athletes, because athletes do make better students, in my opinion, we need to fix these courts. I'm not saying that we should spend another $1 million there, but if this $85,000, it's going to take care of it. Let's do it, get it over with, and I'm voting yes on this tonight, just to let you know.
Okay, thank you. John, I want to thank you for your explanation. Very thorough. It definitely makes sense. This project needs to get completed. Once again, we're talking about finishing off the project. We have money allocated for this project, and $85,000 taken out of the sinking fund, and the sinking fund is to be this money is supposed to be used for situations that arise like this. So, once again, Enfield High School needs this. Our town needs it, and I will be supporting this. So, thank you. Thank you for your explanation. Any other roll call? Let's do it.
Deputy Mayor Sakala. 4. Mayor Corsati.
4.
Councilor Despard.
4.
Councilor Finger.
4.
Councilor Hopkins.
4.
Councilor Ludwig.
Against.
Councilor Mangini.
4.
Councilor Nelson.
4.
Councilor Pisner.
Against.
That's 7 in favor, 2 against, and no abstentions.